something which is, I just noticed talking to some people in the break time about analytical meditation. It came up. Yeah, it's not easy, is it? Very important to be more aware of it. Honestly, I think the meditation I start with is really difficult. The one we do in the very beginning, right? It kind of makes total sense. I mean, to ask you to feel close towards all sentient beings, either all sentient beings is like some kind of abstract, like a group of cute kittens or something, like all sentient beings, and you feel like close to them, but it's really not sentient beings, really, it's just this abstract. Or it's like, yeah, it's so different to go beyond this indifference we naturally have. What do I care about this person, right? I mean, most people we don't care about. It's usually like, don't care, like, dislike, don't care. But to like or dislike, I need to know a little bit about them. And since we don't know most people or most sentient beings, we don't care unless they look cute, right? I mean, like, bunnies and kittens and stuff, right? I mean, I love little doggies and stuff. So, yeah, it's really hard. It's really difficult to do this meditation. There's a way to do it, for instance, to just generate that feeling of love in your mind. So when the love already is being created by thinking of someone you love naturally, you want them to be happy. So you create this love in your mind and you expand it, and everyone else becomes like light rays, and everyone else who stands close enough to the light is illuminated by it. So in a way you can actually make it expand. So that works. But the emotional response, that is also really difficult. So to give you an example, for instance, I think Precious Human Rebirth, that works quite well. To think about, I mean, in our daily life, if I were to ask you, make a list of what's wrong in your life. I'm sure all of you came up with a reasonable list, right? So things, physical, maybe appearance or health status, for instance. I mean, the health situation, like how good our health is, or mentally, how happy we are, then materially, in terms of our possessions or the job we have, and so forth, right? So I'm sure we have a long list of things. But then, if I ask you to meditate, for instance, on your precious human existence, or in other words, saying, I'll point out some of the advantages that all of you have in terms of being human, of course, being relatively healthy, being relatively affluent, having a certain freedom that a lot of people simply don't have in other countries, for instance. Having had an education that allows you to understand many of these ideas quite easily. Coming from a culture that is not German, which means reincarnation? Are you kidding me? Right? Which is the reaction of the majority of Germans. Spiritual practice and not materialism? What's wrong with you, basically? So you come from a culture where karma and reincarnation, I probably don't have to talk more than 10 minutes about it. Whereas I can talk on for hours and days to Germans and they're still not convinced. So you see, there are so many advantages you have in terms of where you were born, who you are, and everything else is secondary. Maybe you don't have the newest washing machine. Maybe, it's difficult with your job, etc., and your health. But you have something that takes you closer to a state that is totally beyond any kind of suffering. So many opportunities that you can actually make sure in the future you're okay. That is so precious. So if you meditate on that, what is the emotional response? Wow. Right? If you can come to that, like, oh my God, I've never really thought about this. I've taken it for granted. I focused on all the pity stuff, on all the stuff I'm dissatisfied with. But if I now really focus, for instance, if you've ever broken your arm, things become really difficult, right? I mean, some of you may have broken. Suddenly you can't do the simplest thing. And if it's both arms, how am I gonna, when the blanket falls off my bed, how am I gonna get it up again? We never think about that, right? How am I gonna get my food? So we have 2 functioning arms. Have you ever spent an hour just reflecting? If you've had both arms in a cast, I think this meditation comes easily, right? Wow, I have both functioning arms. I take it for granted. I have legs that can carry me anywhere. Yeah, my dad is in a wheelchair. He has been for 20 years. He had a stroke in his 60s. So he can't just get up and go to the bathroom. Going to the bathroom is a really long thing, right? He's got to pee urgently. He's got to hold it in. It takes him 10 minutes to get to the toilet. So the point is, we take it for granted. So, but just to sit down and reflect on what I can do versus others. Just simple things that we have, our 4 limbs. Then you can take it further. Not in a religious way, just what I have, what others don't have. In India, if you don't have the means, if you don't have any money, you live underneath a bridge in Delhi. 50 degrees in the summer, and dust and pollution, and hardly anything to eat. Can you do it for 1 day? Imagine 1 day under this bridge. I've driven past these bridges many times, and I'm thinking, how do they do it? And really put yourself into the other person's shoe. The person who has no arms, the person who can't walk, the person who lives under a bridge in Delhi. I mean, there's so many examples. And then look at yourself and go, wow, I am so lucky. Who cares I don't have this, that, and the other? But I have something that is more important. And then you focus on the freedoms and opportunity you have in terms of your spiritual progress. You actually have the means to be sure you won't live under a bridge in Delhi. You develop a mind you can help other people to get off this terrible situation. I mean, incredible how lucky we are. Incredible. So this joy, if you generate a sense of, oh, I'm so happy, makes you very resilient, right? So tomorrow, something happens to you, I don't know, whatever, something that would usually, I don't know, throw you into a deep depression. Instead, you go back to that happy place. I've got both arms. I've got both legs. I'm intelligent enough. I can make a decision. I have people to help me. I have friends. I don't live under a bridge in Delhi. Let's do something. I can do something. So you become very resilient. You're able to face the little things that are actually, in comparison to worse situations, minor. Most importantly, we can overcome the adversities. We have the possibility. So that gives us the strength and this joy to keep going. You see how it's important? This joyful response is important because your behavioral expression, your behavioral response is so important. It protects you. It's your best protection, that joy. Right? It's really important to find that place of joy, because if you're depressed, if you're unhappy because of focusing too much on the not have, that's what we usually do. Our society, actually commercials, are very much geared towards focusing on the not have so that you buy more. But if you focus on the haves, on what you have, then pure joy can arise. And that's the emotional response you need. Like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And it gives you a more optimistic outlook, a more inner joy. In fact, there's been a scientific research on Buddhists, on Buddhist practitioners. I think there were Swedish psychologists who found that every living being, every person, I should say, every human being has a certain level of contentment, a certain level of general happiness and well-being. For some, it's a little lower. It's kind of like that they're not really joyful, but they're okay, you know. And there's this general kind of line. And sometimes things go bad and it goes down, so you feel a little unhappy. And sometimes it goes up and you feel joyful. But usually it's only temporary. It goes down for a while, and then, you know, a day or two, you get used to the situation and you go back to your normal state. and there's an up and it goes down again, right? We can all... Okay. Now they found that people who practice Buddhism, who practice these different techniques, the level is in general higher. They're more joyful. They're a little happier. They're a little more content. There's more contentment, more inner happiness. So the level has gone up. Moreover, the down part is much shorter. So they go down, but very quickly they get up again. So they don't fall into deep depressions. They don't fall into that kind of despair, based on their understanding, of course, of impermanence and how phenomena don't exist inherently, etc. So they come up again. So understanding all this can be part of your reflection. It's like the emotional responses, as I said earlier, this joy, this appreciation and gratitude. These are psychologically very healthy emotions that keep you growing. And this is what I'm asking you to do, really. Like, if you do any kind of meditation, check what could be the emotion, what is the result? Okay, and how can I get there? How can I get more gratitude, more appreciation, more joy, based on the haves, not the have-not, but the haves in my life, the good things in my life, but counting my blessings, basically. And then there are other meditations. For instance, impermanence. How can you get an emotional response from that? It's more like, oh wow, oh yeah. I'm holding onto things that are constantly changing, holding on to my relationships as if they were the same, holding on to my life, holding on to my youth. Let's get more wrinkle cream. Let's get more surgery, I don't know, whatever we do to seem younger, and not being able to let go of what is suffering. Others don't care. We get older, they only care about themselves getting older. So they don't care about us getting older, really. So it's really this one person who's totally obsessed with their age. How difficult. And instead, everything is impermanent, right? I mean, before long, 40 years from now, there's no amount of wrinkle cream will do anything. At some point, it's just a waste of money. I mean, my mom is 87 and she buys this expensive wrinkle cream. It doesn't make any difference. She uses it or she doesn't. I don't know. So it's like the thing is like I don't tell her, but the point is if she was much more in touch with impermanence, she'd save a lot of money, right? Unfortunately, she's never going to watch this, and even if she wouldn't understand, she doesn't speak English, so it's okay, I'm safe. But, and I love her, she's beautiful. But the point is, like, we do so many crazy things. We spend so much money and so much time on things that are totally useless. So when we reflect on this, the impermanence, for instance, really reflect on it, and take it to a deeper level. It's so hard to put it into words. How do I really say that? But that you were like, inside it's like, wow, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Right? I could give this money to some charity and help a lot of people with that instead of hoping for something that's never going to happen. So in that way, it's really becoming more in tune with reality. And that is so liberating, because we're almost like running against the wall with our head and trying to break through it, and it's not going to happen. As an example, being impermanence, right? But then someone else brought up love and compassion. Yeah, that's difficult. I'm really happy that everyone I talk to is so honest. That's so nice that you really, you're not deceiving yourself. You're very honest. Yeah, we do feel indifferent about most people. Of course we do. So how can we break through that? That is much harder. But then it can also be part of your meditation to just focus on that indifference. Why am I indifferent? Why am I indifferent? I mean, this person is potentially my new best friend. Think of your own best friend. In the past, you didn't know them. You couldn't care less about them. And now they're the center of your social life, possibly. So again, understanding that there's so many people who are potential friends. So then it's already, we're open towards them in a different way. This is a potential friend. Not a friend yet. I don't really care about them, but potentially I could. So you're already moving closer to them. Right? And oftentimes, the meditations we do here, you need to adjust them. You need to work with them. I don't know your mind. I'm just saying something that I think may be beneficial. But you are the one. Think of what is the result I want to get mentally. Where do I want to get? How could I get there? And use your own creativity. Get in touch with your own wisdom. And before you know, you come up with your own techniques. And that's in the end what you need to do. You know your mind better than anyone else. Right? Does that make sense? So please don't give up on these meditations. They're so helpful. But no, your reflection should lead you to a positive state of mind. A positive state of mind that is an emotion, that has an emotional response, even if it's just awe. Right? It's not like, oh, how great. Here, but wow. That really moves you. It moves you in such a way that it changes our behavior, changes your behavior, right? Your actions, your interactions with others. That makes life easier, first of all. Right? Brings more happiness, more freedom, mental freedom. Okay, anyway, but we'll keep going through it, and let's now return to the text. Okay, so where do we get to? Oh, the house. Also, someone asked me about the house. Made some good points. So, with regard to the house, someone was saying, okay, if the house existed inherently, you would have to see the entire house, because we say the house is the entire house. So if the house existed inherently, it wouldn't make sense to say I see the house when I only see the front. It would be incorrect to say I see the house when I just see the front, and that would be absurd to say that's incorrect. We're not requiring anyone to say you're no longer, or anyone to refrain from saying I see the house or I see you when I only see a part of you, right? But it needs to make sense in terms of how the house really exists. So if the house existed inherently, by just seeing a part, you couldn't say I see the house. Does that make sense? And so this person said, well, what about if someone were able to see the entire house? That's possible. But then touching the house, you can't say I touched the house by just touching a part of it. Because to touch the house, you would have to touch the entire house. And that's impossible. However long your arms may be, you can't touch the house. When you touch the outside, you can't touch the inside, etc. So my point is just the fact that phenomena are merely labeled allows us to say, I see the house when I see part of it. I see this person, right? I see John, for instance, because I see a part of John. I don't see the mind of John. I don't see the back of John. I don't see the inside of John. I only see the outside and a certain part of it. And still I can say, I saw John and I talked to John. Because John is merely labeled. In that moment, I label John on the parts that I see. Right? Okay. Anyway, but going back to our sense of John or the house, well, it would be so absurd. There were these extremes, these absurdities that would result from saying, our perception of the house as inherently existent. So, if, for instance, a house, so this is on page 7, if a house existed inherently, was able to constitute itself, we would be able to see the house without having to depend on seeing anything that is not the house. So again, to repeat it, the house existed inherently. It didn't need anything. It didn't need any parts. I could see the house without needing to see parts that are not the house. In actuality, however, whenever we say we see a house, we always see something that is not the house. You never see the house. You never see the house. You only ever see parts that are not the house. Isn't that bizarre? You think about it. You only see the front, you never see so forth. So the house consists of a collection of different parts assembled in a particular way. Yet when looking at the house, it is impossible to perceive the totality of those parts, because when seeing the front, we do not see the back, and when seeing the outside, we do not see the inside. Since the front, the back, the inside, and the outside of the house are each not the house, we only perceive something that is not the house. That's how far it goes, right? The same applies to other phenomena, such as the eye. When I say the eye does, it's always something that is not the eye that does. Right? When I say the eye walks, it's only parts of the eye that are not the eye. Your feet walk. It's not like every part of you walks. That would be absurd. Your little finger would have to walk. Your nose would have to walk. It doesn't even touch the ground. Therefore, it's never the eye that does anything. When you say, I meditate, your ears don't meditate. Your eye consciousness doesn't meditate. Right? You just sit, your body just sits there. There's one mind meditating. One. Because if it was more than one mind, you wouldn't be meditating, you'd be distracted. Right? Well, this mind thinking about breakfast, this mind thinking about dinner, this mind meditating, you'd be scattered. So when you meditate, best case scenario is one mind is active and doing what it wants, or what you want it to do, that is to meditate. Okay. So this is important to understand that, as of the parts. So, when looking at the house, Ayadeva, a great Indian master who was a disciple of the great Nagarjuna, he says in his 400 stanzas, when seeing its form, the whole vase is not in fact seen. So when you look at a vase, when you look at the form means the shape basically of the vase, it's not in fact seen. So you see the part of the shape, but you don't see the entire vase. Who that knows reality would claim that the entire vase is directly perceptible also? Yeah, so the word entire is in brackets because it's not mentioned in Tibetan because of the meter of the verse, but from the commentaries we know that entire is meant. So you don't see the entirety. You can never see the entirety of something because it's merely labeled. It's merely labeled. Furthermore, if an inherently existent house existed, all right, now we come to this. It would have to be either one, or identical with its parts, or different from its parts. You may have heard this so many times, some of you, right? Not all of you. Okay, one thing I want to advise you. If you study Buddhism, you need to have a certain attitude. The more you study it, the more you need this particular attitude. Because in the beginning, it's all like, oh, it's new, it's nice, it's entertaining, right? Okay. But the entertainment factor slowly will wear off. And since we're a society who's entertained, right? We have so many TV programs, we have so many social media we are not good with boredom, let's put it that way. So there's one attitude that's very important when you study Buddhism. A beginner's mind. Whatever you do, like in the Zen tradition, there's the beginner's mind. Do it as if you would do it for the first time. When you do your prayers, as if you've never done it before. So when you do something for the first time, right, it's like, whoa, it's so interesting, it's so entertaining. I mean, entertaining not in a bad way, but you do it with your whole being. You want to totally focus on it, it's fun, you want to do it really well. But then slowly it kind of wears off and it becomes like a routine. Now when you do Buddhist practice, do it as if you did it for the first time, every time, and you really enjoy it. Right? It's new every time because you have a different attitude. You've changed since yesterday, and if you do it with a beginner's mind, it's every time a new experience. This is really important to keep going basically, and not to fall into some kind of routine. So this beginner's mind. Anyway, identical with its parts, different from its parts. Why do we analyze that? That seems so boring for some of you. I mean, for those of you who've heard it so many times, right? Why this? Can we not do something else for a change? Going back to either one with its parts or different from its parts, right? But why is that so important? Why is that so important? Okay. Now I've talked for long enough. Now it's up to you to bring in. Why is this important? One with its part, different from its parts. Why do we talk about the parts, first of all? Secondly, why are there only these two options? Is there no third option? That's if the I, for instance, existed the way it appeared to me, it would either have to be one with everything that is part of the I, or different. Any kind of idea? Any idea of why that is the case? Anything that comes to mind? There's no right or wrong answer. Just the fact that you think about it and want to share it with others. That's all that counts. Anyone? Why the parts? Why the parts? Why, in the case of a car, for instance, you would take the parts of the car. In the case of the person, you would take mind and body, right? Why?
Because I can see it.
Pardon?
Because I can see it.
Because you can see it. Oh, okay. Because in order to perceive the self or another person, what you perceive are the parts of the self, right? Or the parts of the car. Okay. Yeah, so when we say, how does the I exist? We're not going to look for the I over there, but we're going to look for the I where its parts are. The same is true for the car, right? When we start to analyze a car, okay, think of your car. You don't need to have it in front of you. What makes it a car? Don't take the Buddha's right answer. Don't immediately go, oh, because it's merely labeled on the basis of it. Don't go there. Because that's the answer we don't feel yet. Check how you feel about it. When I say doing analytical meditation, you try to generate an emotional response, I'm also saying this in terms of what you analyze should be based on how it feels. How does it feel to you to exist? How does a person close to you feel to exist? How does this person seem to exist to your mind? How does it feel? So does it seem where is this person, the person you're attached to, where their mind and their body is? Okay, so let's look there. Yes, let's look there. Because they're not over there. If the person you're attached to, their mind and body are here, don't look for the person over there. Of course, we won't do that. So that makes perfectly sense. Okay, so obviously, it's the parts, it's that which belongs to the object. The parts belong to the object. That's where we're going to look. But where does that come from? Either one or different. Why is there not a third? Is there a third possibility from the point of view of the right view? From the point of view of the right view. So when we are looking for an inherent, what are we looking for? An inherent I, right? When we take the I, for instance, or a house, we're looking for an inherent house. Do you all agree? We're not looking for the conventional house, an inherent house. So if you have an inherently existent house, the way it appears to us, or an inherently existent I have two options. Either they're one or they're different from its parts. So the I is either one with its parts or different from its parts. If it's one with its parts, it means identical with its parts. And if it's different, it means totally separate. Do you agree? Why is this also true for the conventional I, the merely labeled I and its parts? Is that true? For the conventional I, it's either one with its parts or totally separate from its parts. Is that also true?
Yes.
Yes? So, your conventional I exists independently of your mind and body? separate from your mind and body? No. No, it doesn't, right? So for the conventional I, the conventional and merely labeled I, it's not one with its parts, but it's also not totally separate from its parts. But why are there, so they're not just these two options for a conventional I, but for an inherent I, there are only two options. That doesn't seem fair. I mean, I'm kidding, but why is that the case for the inherently existent I, but not for the merely labeled I? Yes?
Because one is independent and one is dependent.
Very good. Because one exists independently and the other one doesn't. So, if it existed as different from its parts, it would mean totally independent of its parts. Because it exists independently in the first place, because it's inherently existent. Now, with the conventional I, is the conventional I one with its parts or different?
Independent on its parts.
It's dependent on the parts, but of the two, one and different, what is it?
Different.
It's still different, but not independently different. So different here means, when we talk about just the conventional I, different means not totally separate, but just not identical. I give it different names. One is called the I, and one is called mind and body, right? So they're different, but not totally different. That's important to understand. For the conventional I, there's no problem to say that the merely labeled I is not the same as mind and body, okay, but also not totally separate. Okay, that's an important point. But when it comes to the inherent I, that really existed. Either it's one with its parts, right, or it's totally separate, because it can't depend on them. Does that make sense? That there are only these two options. Either it's exactly identical, so then I don't have to worry that it depends on some other phenomena, because it's totally one with its parts. So being one with its part, being dependent on itself is not a problem, if it exists inherently. If it just depends, mind and body and person, if it was all one, okay. Inherently one, if we imagine it existed the way it appears, well, if it's just one with mind and body, okay. But if it's separate, it cannot depend on something other than itself, because it exists inherently. Which is why it would be totally separate. Those are the two options. We're only left with two options. Either it's totally one with everything that is part of it, or totally separate. Can we agree with this? Can you agree with this to a certain degree? No? Not yet? No? No. No, fair enough. Be honest, say if you can't. Why not? Can you see a third option? Think like there's like the way yourself appears, like separate from mind and body, right? Like I, like the sense of there's an I somewhere here, just your own feeling of I, especially when you're insulted, for instance, when there's great unhappiness, or when someone praises you, it feels very separate, doesn't it? So in that moment, okay, so there's a strong sense, there's the I, and there are my mind and my body. If that I really existed the way it appears, what would be its relationship between its parts and in itself? Either there would be one that would be identical, or there wouldn't, right? Those are the two options. But if it were, and different, I think we all agree. I mean, one is ridiculous. I'm not my mind, I'm not my body. So we can very quickly move away from the first option. The second option, if the I existed the way it appears, it can exist without anything else. It's like it's inherent. There's some essence there. So even if I removed my parts, I would still have an I. It's absurd the way it sounds, but that would be the consequence, logically. All right, if we understand this roughly, let's look at this. If the inherently existent house were different from its parts, it would have to be completely separate from its walls, roof, windows, and so forth. It would exist independently. In this case, it would make no sense to say that the house is modern, for example, if its parts are modern. Also, it should be possible to perceive the house after all its parts have been removed. Right? Okay, get the parts out of the way. I want to see the house. Right? No walls, no windows, nothing. Oh, there's the house. Absurd. If, on the other hand, it were one with its parts, it would be utterly, in all ways, one with its walls, roof, windows, and so on. But those parts are a plurality, they're many. So the house would have to be plural. You'd have houses, and not just the house. And since the house is a single entity, then the parts of the house would have to be a singular. So it's like, in one case, there are many parts, which is one house. If they were identical, either they would both be singular or both be pluralities. That doesn't make sense. And you can apply the same to the house, but to the self. You end up with a multiple personality, right? If all the parts were the self, that wouldn't make sense. But usually we opt for something else. Some people may argue that the house is identical with the collection of the parts. Oh, thank God for the collection. Right? There's a sense like, oh no, it's not each of these parts, that would be ridiculous, but it's the collection of the parts. That's usually what we opt for, right? So it's all the parts. It's not each part individually, but it's the collection of the parts. That makes more sense. But, unfortunately, the house, that it's all of its parts assembled in a particular way, however, then it would not make sense to talk of the door of the house, for instance, since that implies there's something, that is to say the house, that possesses the door and is thus different from it. If it were one with the collection of the parts, you can't say the door of the house. Yesterday, someone asked, I forget exactly, I think it was you, who asked, or was it about this, is it the same, the subtle mind and the self? The subtle mind, right? That was you, yeah. Yes. You can't see him right now. He's doing the technical things. The technique. So anyway, so at that time, I said, well, you say it's my subtle mind, implying that there is something that owns the subtle mind. Here in this case, when I say the door of the house, the collection of the house and collection are not identical. It would no longer make sense to talk about the collection of the house, the self, or the collection of the parts of the self. We could no longer say that because they're identical. Nor would it make sense to say that the house is neglected when only its exterior is run down. Because for the house to be in need of repair, the collection of its parts, all of its parts, would have to be in need of repair, even if the interior had just been renovated. In other words, if the house is all the parts, if one part is broken, all the parts need to be broken. Does that make sense? If the I is the collection of all the parts, if my head hurts, the collection of the parts has to hurt. And that again doesn't make sense. I don't think like that, and it doesn't actually, even from a Buddhist point of view, even from the point of view of emptiness, it's correct to say, I feel sick, when only one part of you feels sick. It's okay to say, I meditate, when only one aspect, one mind meditates. So it would put everything upside down if I were no longer allowed to say, I'm sick when just my belly hurts, right? So, the conventions, that's why the Buddha said, I do not contradict the conventions of the world. In fact, the conventions of the world only make sense if the self doesn't exist the way it appears. Right? Because I can still say, I talk when really just my mouth is talking. My ears aren't, my fingers aren't, right? Okay. So in that sense, if the I were the collection of the part, every part that is part of that collection would have to do what the I does. Is that clear? Does that make sense? So collection is out as well. Not identical with the parts, doesn't make sense. Not separate from the parts, that also doesn't make sense. And not the collection of the parts. So that inherent I, the way it appears to us all the time, none of these are an option. And is there a fourth possibility? I'd like to hear. One with its parts out. Totally separate from its parts, which it has to be because it exists inherently, doesn't work. The being the collection of the parts, also not an option, as we've just heard. That wouldn't make sense, right? You can take a car as well. A car can't be the collection of its parts because we could no longer say the car is broken when only its engine is broken. Because the collection of parts would have to be broken, and that doesn't make sense. Okay. So is there a fourth option? Any other possibility? And that's what you explore in your meditation. And again, I would like you to meditate as a homework. As a homework, I want you to do the following meditation. These are all heavy-duty meditations. But never mind, right? We need to start somewhere. Might as well do the heavy-duty ones. Focus on the meditation as your homework today would be, think of your own sense of self. Bring back a time when it felt very strongly, I. Usually these are times at strong emotions. So when someone blames you for something you haven't done, embarrasses you in front of others, right? I mean, walking around like this in Germany, oh, very good. Unless it's fashion. We have a time of carnival, like Halloween. I'm anonymous. This is my favorite time, walking around with my world in Germany. Sometimes they ask me whether I'm real. Is this real? It doesn't really look like a fashion costume. But, other than that, walking, if I were Asian, it wouldn't be a problem. But the way I look, I'm obviously not born a Buddhist. Walking like that through town, my sense of an inherent self, very strong. And Germans, they don't look at you like Indians, for instance, do. Like Indians also look at me. They look after you're gone, and they look. So if I look behind, everyone is looking at me. So like in India, they're like direct. They're like, ooh. And then they let it go. In Germany, it's like they pretend they don't see you. And then you will pass, they're all looking. So you can't turn around, it's more embarrassing. So the point is, therefore, in those situations, good opportunity to watch my own self, right? Whoa, from all sides, people are paying attention to it. So those are good moments of watching the I. Or when someone praises you, like, whoa, you're so special. You're better than everyone else. And it feels like, ooh, it kind of comes out. Like, it's almost like, like I'm up here. So there were these psychologically effective situations. Do something embarrassing in the train or something. Get up and sing a song. Anyway, so, yeah, there are different things you could do. I don't want you to do them. But the point is, so there are different situations when there's a strong sense of I. And then when you go home, you could just remember those times, usually because we're so embarrassed, we remember for a long time, so that's the good part. So you work with the memory, just times when it felt very strongly. And then see, so that I, the way it appeared to me, it seemed real. My experience in that moment was, it was there. Okay, so saying it's not there would contradict all my experiences, really. And in that particular moment, it was particularly strong. So you focus on that, and then check. So what is its relationship to the mind? How are those two connected? Because they're obviously connected. Are they identical? Or did it feel like, oh, my mind was there, and this is the I? Right? How did it feel? It doesn't feel like they're the same. It certainly doesn't feel like they're the same. So we can pretty quickly kind of let go of that. So it's not the same. It's also not the collection, for the reasons I gave earlier, because if anything is wrong, anything is true for the eye, it has to be true for all the parts. And that's ridiculous. It's impossible. When one of our body parts is sick, it doesn't make sense to say that all the parts, physical and mental, are sick. That would be absurd. So that doesn't work. And then the other option is separate. Separate as in like, well, then my age, old or young, would have nothing to do with my body or mind. I mean, I could be an old person when I'm 5 years old, and I could be an infant when I'm 80 years old, because self and mind and body are totally separate. I wouldn't say the eye is unhappy when the mind is unhappy. It wouldn't happen. So to really analyze each step, don't jump any state. Because although we may think, oh, I can just drop that. But you see, in analytical meditation, our lamas tell us there is no and so forth in an analytical meditation. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's no and so forth. It means like, okay, this is true for the mind and so forth. No, now go through even for the body. Go through each stage. It's like there's this joke, this Honda sometimes tells in the Heart Sutra. In the Heart Sutra, it says there's no eye, no ear, no nose, etc. And someone apparently in Tibet said to the person reciting the Heart Sutra, why don't you just say there's no face? Why not shorten it? Right? So why ear, I know, oh no, right? It's like, because if you think about the eyes and meditate on that, there's no inherently existent eye, no inherently existent mouth. It's so much more effective if you go through all of them. Even though before you do so, you feel, oh, the rest is obvious, and so forth. No, but your emotional response is very different if you go through all of them. So the eye is not so for instance, in the case of the meditation on the eye is not the mental consciousness. It's not the subtle mind. It's not the coarse mind. It's not the subtle mind, because right now there is no subtle mind, but the eye is there. It's not the coarse mind, because when this coarse mind is not active, only the subtle mind is active, there's still an eye. It's not like I'm like Swiss cheese. Sometimes I'm there and sometimes I'm not, depending whether I hit a hole or not, right? No. The eye is there at all times, whether coarse mind or subtle mind, whether the sense perception is most prevalent or the mental perception is most prevalent. The eye is there at all times. There's a body, the eye is there when there's a body, it relates to the body. Again, I'm sick or not. So really go through all of these aspects. How does the eye relate to the body? Really take your time and search for it. Search for the eye. Search for it. Search for it. Is it there? Is it there? You may start off when you have a sense of this inherent eye, look for it in the body. So if it feels like it's here, it's in the heart, then it should be that your head is above you. Think about it, right? If your eye were here, if your essence were in your heart, then actually your neck would be above, right? You would have to have the sense that your head is here, the belly is down here. You would be like sitting here in the middle. That's not how it feels. Or if you think your eye sits between your ears and behind your eyes. Between your ears and behind your eyes. So then it's your brain, right? But then if someone hit you on the knee, who cares? It's the knee. I'm up here. Right? It wouldn't be like they hit me. They stepped on my foot. No, it would be a foot. But not yours. You're up here. There's a foot down there. It's like a meter or two away, right? So it wouldn't make sense to be offended that someone stepped on your foot. Okay. So in that sense, therefore, really reflect on this the way I just did. Take your time and go through it as if you didn't know, you had never heard the eye doesn't exist inherently. Like be like a scientist, not trusting what the Buddha said, but really explore. And if you don't find it, the emotional response is like, it's not there, right? It's really like, again, you may fake it a little bit, but if you can, the best case scenario would be like, wow. I mean, if it's done in the way, most effective way, let's say, I don't want to say in the wrong way, because whichever way you do it is the right way. But the most effective way would be like, I can't find it. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking of it all the time. My whole life revolves around it, and I can't find it. That non-findability, that is the emptiness of yourself. Just not being able to find it. Undergoing ultimate analysis. That's what I want you to do. It's a really difficult meditation. It's not easy. You don't need to do it. You can do it in the meditation space, but you can do it anywhere else as well. You may just lie down on your sofa. No, lying down, there's the danger, because when we lie down, we usually go to sleep, so you may fall asleep. You may just comfortably sit down on your sofa, maybe sitting cross-legged. Someone asked me why sitting cross-legged and so forth. Well, the thing is, that's how people sat in India, right? So this is what was passed down to us. I keep saying if the Buddha came at this point in time, he'd be sitting on a sofa, right? On a comfortably good for your back kind of health chair or something. And even Maitreya is no longer sitting on the floor. So when Maitreya comes, I guess most people sit on chairs. So the Buddha is, shown in that position. So this is not necessary, sitting on the floor. It's just how traditionally it was done. So in whichever way you feel comfortable. The back is straight. It just helps to be more focused. I mean, try to sit like that for a long time and see what happens to your mind. It's just the energy doesn't run smoothly and you get distracted. So that's the only reason. But wherever you can, do the meditation. Do it. And before we speak more, just do it and see what happens. There's nothing beyond that experience. It's like we can talk about driving a car. You can know everything about driving a car, but you've never driven a car. So we can really just know what it's like when we really drive a car. So right now we're just talking about doing it. But once, when you come back tomorrow, that's like the difference between knowing intellectually how to do it versus having done it. Very different experience. Let's all do it. I'll do it myself. I'll do it. Right? Totally beginner mind. Try to generate a beginner mind. It's great in a hotel room with air conditioning. There's just zoo and nothing else. It's like this white noise. It's a perfect place to meditate. You feel like in a bubble. So anyway, you all have air AC, so you can all get that sense of a bubble. Okay, so let's do this as your homework. But then let's continue a little bit with this here, because this is really the meditation is in here. Yeah, you can use the house, but you can also take the body. It would not be possible to see the house, because for that we would have to be able to see all its parts. Oh, this is again saying it's all its parts. So to see the house, if it was all its parts, you would have to see all its parts. If the self were all its parts, you could never think about the self without thinking of all the parts. Impossible. How can you think of yourself at the same time thinking of everything, mind and body, every little toe, every blood vessel? It's impossible. The same analysis should be done for the I or the self. So you can now take the analysis of the house, which is a little easier because you don't have to think about a mind. You just think of parts that we're all familiar with. Now you apply it to yourself. Nagarjuna says in his Precious Garden, so to be sure that we of course understand that this is in accordance with Nagarjuna's writings and Nagarjuna's teachings. Let me double check what time do we finish. 5:30? Yeah. The aggregates are not the self. They are not in the self. The self is not in them. Without them, there is no self. The aggregates and the self are not mixed like fire and fuel. So how can the self exist? You can go along this analysis if you want. First, do the analysis as I just described, and then focus on these verses for a moment and reflect on them. Chandakirti says in his Entering the Middle Way, if the aggregates were the self, then the self would be many, since the aggregates are many. This is like if there were one. Likewise, he says, so there is no self separate from the aggregates. The self is not separate from mind and body. Aggregates just another word for mind and body. So the self does not so there's no self separate from the aggregates, since there's no perception of the self outside the aggregates. Kind of remove mind and body and be left with the self. That's impossible. The self does not exist in the aggregates, as in like there's this little self in between. That doesn't make sense. Nor do the aggregates exist in the self. Shantideva says in the way of the Bodhisattva, for instance, if we cut the trunk of the banana tree into its parts, we find nothing. So a banana tree is made of different layers, like an onion. It's kind of like the leaves are like, onion leaves, and there's no solid trunk in the middle, or like a solid piece of onion in the middle, in the case of an onion. So we don't find anything solid in the center. Likewise, the self is not really there if we search for it through analysis. But here, again, if we just do it intellectually, it's like selfness is over there and my life is here. No relation. That's where the emotional is important. What does that mean for my life? So the emotional takes us to the point where we think, what does that mean in my interaction with others? What does that mean with my difficulties in life? What does that mean with my hatred towards a particular person? Having hurt me, where is the hurt I? Where's the I that is hurting? Where's the I that has been insulted? Where's the I that has been humiliated? Where's the I that has failed? Can't be found. Where's the I that lost its reputation, its whatever it is? Can't be found. This is incredible. If you can really bring it onto that level, and this is what you can do. Where do you need to take it? You can kind of take it there yourself by understanding how it should now affect you in your daily dealings with the challenges of everyday life. If it's just slightly reduced. So it may go don't expect anything drastic. It takes a little bit more because our self-centeredness and our self-grasping are really strong. But it may just bring you to a level where everything goes wrong and you just remember, well, at least the self doesn't exist the way it appears. Just remembering that much, it takes off some of the momentum, that unhappiness, that sense of, oh my God, failure or whatever. And that gets stronger over time, stronger and stronger and stronger, so that you become more and more resilient. And the beauty is we have the lamas as examples. We have these amazing lamas. So if you study the Dharma and you do some contemplation. So here contemplation, it doesn't necessarily mean you sit meditating one-pointed. Like in the Gelugpa tradition, they even say, I don't meditate, because they think of meditation as very advanced meditation. And it would be very arrogant to say, I do advanced meditation. So in the West and in other traditions, they say even beginners' meditations are meditations. So I'm not saying we're doing these advanced meditations with calm abiding and special insight and all the technical, difficult stuff. But I would say we do meditate, in that we familiarize ourselves with the ideas, because that's the literal meaning of meditation. We familiarize ourselves with these ideas, right? And so slowly when you do that, you can also recognize a change not only in yourself, and that's beautiful. I've spoken to some people who say, yeah, there may not be an immediate, obvious change, but when I look back a year, a few months, I'm different. It's a slow change. It's not like, from 1 hour to the next, I'm a new person. No, of course not. That doesn't happen. That doesn't even happen with our body. If you eat healthily, you need a few months to get all the junk food out, right? So similarly with our mind, it takes some time. But then you look back and you go, wow, it works. I'm not the same person. That's so rewarding. And on top of that, you also notice the changes in other people because you've undergone them. And you actually can notice that there are lamas, you don't notice a self. Which is another way of saying you don't notice a self-cherishing. I remember I had this thought, and this was really interesting, when I met Geshe Kelsang Wangmo once. For many years, I used to teach like a summer program of some students from Emory. They had this connection to the IBD. And as a, usually we're required as part of our study to give something back to the institute. And so I was required to do this teaching program, teach philosophy. And so they wanted to go and see Geshe Kelsang Wangmo. And I remember thinking, the movie Lama. Sorry, that was I was like, oh, he's just some kind of... I didn't have the thought like he's not a degenerate Lama, but it was like, movies, he's not really, he's just making movies. So I was arrogant when I came in there. And then he said something, wow, I never forgot what he said. The first thing he said was, the Buddha diluted the teachings. And I was like, of course the movie Lama, of course. And then he explained, and he blew my mind. He said, the Buddha diluted the teachings because the truth, how phenomena really exist, is beyond words. You cannot, right now, when we hear the words, we think of inherent existence. So it's very difficult to understand what's behind these words. So it's actually beyond the words we ordinarily use. So the Buddha diluted the teachings. He said, he's like, the truth is like a laser beam. We can't see the laser beam, but you can spray paint on it to know where it's located. So if you have a laser beam and you spray paint it, I've never done that, I imagine it's possible. So, if you spray paint it, at least you know where it is. That's the closest you can get. So the Buddha's words were like the spray paint on the laser beam. Wow, that's when I was impressed. When he said, that's like, of course, that makes so much sense. And as he continued talking, I kept thinking, I don't get a sense of a self. That was so bizarre. I couldn't put it into words. There was no self-cherishing. There was just being. And that was so inspiring. And ever since that... Was that me? No. Is it? No. I thought I was moving too much. So ever since that time, I've noticed like there are these amazing lamas. Yalmir Rinpoche. Last year, I went briefly to London. He was translating there, and as I happened to be in Germany, it was just an hour flight away. So I translated for him, and I spent a little bit of time. I mean, of course, there were other people always around, but just sometimes translating or being in his presence, I really didn't get a sense of an I. That was so inspiring, and also, of course, with his holiness, obvious. I don't rub shoulders with his holiness, so obviously, there's less time spent. But the point is that I believe, yes. Oh, that one. All right, is it switched on? Yeah, it's switched on. Can you hear me? So the point is, therefore, it is possible to overcome our self-centeredness. That's the beauty. We have lamas who embody the teachings, who embody them. They bring it alive. This theory, they bring it alive. And when we see it in them, we know we can do the same. It's possible. Right? So there's real hope for us, however difficult it may be. But everything we do in the beginning is difficult. I mean, doing yoga, doing weightlifting, whatever, it's all difficult. And the difficulty is part of it. I mean, weightlifting a feather, right? You won't sweat, it's comfortable right away, lift up a feather. Okay, done. But it won't have any effect. So hardship is part of it. The problem is we expect nirvana to be there right away. We're looking for nirvana, it's supposed to be there. And my meditation should be peaceful, I should get up and feel so much better. It's not going to happen, right? It's like expecting to go to the gym without sweating and being calm and relaxed without having to move. We can do that. We can go to the gym and do that, but it's not going to do anything, right? Okay. Anyway, let's go back to this. This type of analysis, where you take everything apart, is called ultimate analysis. Because if you're looking for something absolute, something inherent, something ultimately existent, because it searches for a phenomenon's inherent existence, but instead finds the phenomenon's deepest level of existence, the emptiness or lack of inherent existence. So emptiness is just the non-findability of that inherent existence. It's not the non-findability of conventional existence, because you haven't searched for a conventional existence. By definition, ultimate analysis means you look for something inherent, for something truly there, the way it appears to the mind. Having thus negated the way in which phenomena do not exist, we need to posit the way in which they do exist. Only then, after we haven't found the I, then, because then it seems the I is maybe not there. Now we need to posit how it does exist in order not to be left in the extreme of nihilism. So we may have a moment of falling into extreme of nihilism. That's not a problem, but to remain in that extreme is a problem, which is why then we focus on dependent arising. Okay, so having thus negated which phenomena do not exist, we need to posit the way in which they do exist. For even though phenomena do not exist by way of their own character, objectively and from their own side, objectively I just added, it's not, they nevertheless exist because they harm or benefit us, perform certain functions and so forth. So it would be ludicrous to say it's nothing there. I mean, things are there. I mean, Singapore is pretty full with things, right? I mean, streets and cars and buildings and people. To say they don't exist would be absurd. The way they exist is explained in the context of explaining dependent arising. Nagarjuna says in his 70 verses on emptiness, the peerless Tathagata taught that because all things are empty of inherent existence, things arise in dependence. It's because they lack this type of existence that we wrongly perceive. Therefore, they can only exist in dependence on other phenomena. And it's a little bit difficult. This takes some time to bring the two together, to see how they support each other. It seems like, yeah, emptiness is there, dependent arising is there, but this doesn't seem to be a real connection. Let's look at it. Dependent arising. This is not your homework. For your homework is still just looking for the I. I don't want to make it too difficult, but of course I'll read through it. The Tibetan term for dependent arising, the short version is Dendel, is the abbreviated form of Denjin Dewa Joma. Since it's not easy to translate it, literally translating each word separately may help to get a better sense of its meaning. So Den means depend or rely, Jing means and, Doa means connect, to relate or to pertain to, and Juma means to arise, to come forth, to occur, to originate. So it's not a literal translation, as we can see. Dependent arising is not a literal translation of the Tibetan term, the longer version being, or the full version being Denjin Dewa Juma. So Denjin Dewa Juma can be translated as that which arises as a phenomenon, as something that exists, that has to be put in brackets, that is connected and dependent on other phenomena. Right? So it comes into existence, or it does exist. Well, first of all, it has to come into existence, and then it exists in dependence on other phenomena in relation to other phenomena. And implied by that is once it has come into existence, once it has arisen, as long as it exists, it also depends on other phenomena. That's implied by that term. The more common translation is dependent arising or dependent origination. Right? Phenomena exist because they are dependent arisings. That is to say, they are connected to and dependent on a myriad of other phenomena, on so many other phenomena. Taking the typical example of a sprout, okay, you don't have a sprout in a monastery, usually in a prayer hall. You have a vase and you have a pillar. But sprouts are very popular because I guess everyone in the world knows a sprout. If you're health conscious, you eat sprouts. If you're a gardener, it's part of your process of planting a seed, then you have a sprout, then you have the plant, right? So taking the example of a sprout, there are numerous different phenomena to which a sprout is connected and on which it depends, and which are responsible for the existence of the sprout. These phenomena can be classified into three categories: causes and conditions, paths, designation by name and thought. Those are the three types of dependent arisings. This means that there are three levels. So here's just a little illustration to remember that dependent arising includes those three, with dependence on causes and conditions, of course, only applying to impermanent phenomena, but important because everything we're attached to or we are angry towards is always impermanent, right? All our dealings are with impermanent objects, the sense objects mainly, and our relationship with other people, for instance. Okay. So reflection and meditation on the three levels of dependent arising is considered indispensable to avoid the extreme of nihilism. So when we subject phenomena to ultimate analysis, when searching for the inherent nature of a phenomenon, in other words, there's the danger of cultivating the wrong idea that since phenomena cannot be found under such an analysis, they do not exist. Contemplating dependent arising helps to overcome such a wrong view, and it facilitates the realization of how phenomena exist. But it deepens also our understanding of emptiness. Because they are dependently arisen, they lack inherent existence. But at the same time, they protect us from the extreme believing that there's nothing. That's just another extreme, as opposed to the extreme of perceiving phenomena to exist inherently. Furthermore, an understanding of dependent arising also promotes an understanding of emptiness. So this is what I just said. When we reflect and meditate on the three types of dependent arising, we come to understand that an impermanent phenomenon, because of its dependence on causes and conditions, its dependence on paths, and its dependence on designation by name and thought, cannot exist objectively and from its own side, because if it existed in this way, it would be independent of other phenomena. It wouldn't need anything else. So Nagarjuna says in his fundamental wisdom, whatever has arisen in dependence is called emptiness. Emptiness is dependent designation, and thus the middle way. There's nothing that has not arisen in dependence, therefore there's nothing that is not empty. And finally, Ayadeva says in his 400 stanzas, if a thing did not depend on anything else at all, it would be self-established, but such a thing exists nowhere. Okay, so this is all I wanted to read today. I kind of did 48 pages really, divided by 12 sessions. That's 4 pages every day. But I'm surprised. You guys have a good background. I taught this before in June. This is when I put this material together. I changed it slightly. I always change it. But at that time, it was like a full course, beginning to evening, like morning session, afternoon session for 11 days. And I didn't go as quickly through it as now because you already have a background. It is pretty quick. So this is really helpful. First I thought I'm never going to finish this text, but now I realize I can actually go through everything. That's wonderful. But anyway, so that's it for today on this material. Before I open it for questions, I want to say one thing. It may not be so obvious how this understanding of the first type of dependence, in particular, dependence on causes and conditions, helps us to understand emptiness. It seems a little removed from it. So what? It's dependent on causes and conditions. In what way does it mean it doesn't exist inherently? Well, one way to think about it is the fact that it has not always existed. You needed something other than itself for it to come into existence. So again, it can't be inherent, because inherent means it's always been there. It has always been there, and it will always be there, because it's unaffected by anything else. That's one way to think about this. But on a more practical level, when we don't perceive how phenomena really exist, that gives rise to hatred, resentment, aversion. Our misperception of reality is the breeding ground for these emotions. They work hand in hand. Whereas an understanding of dependent arising helps us to generate the opposite, love and compassion. Now, to give you an example, when you have hatred towards someone, maybe a serial killer, who we don't even know personally. It may just be, we may know this person, but we may not. And I think, have you ever had serial killers in Singapore? Oh, you did? Long time ago, I guess. Okay, a long time ago. So I was a serial killer. Do you know his name? I say this, assuming.
There's a guy called Adrian.
Pardon?
There's a guy called Adrian.
Adrian.
Yeah.
Adrian the serial killer.
Oh, Adrian, yeah.
Okay, please look up. No, I'm kidding. I'm certainly going to look up Adrian the serial killer. But the point is, like, we have a natural reaction when we hear this. Like, oh, an evil person. Our heart becomes hard. Our heart becomes hard, right? The sense of, ooh. And like, if there's someone who's killed children, it's even worse. So, did he kill children?
Yes.
Oh, Adrian the serial killer. Oh my God, it's even worse, right? I mean, I'm not making fun of it. It's serious, it's terrible. So, we can feel this reaction in our heart, this kind of like, oh, I hope they executed. Did they execute him? No, they took off to another country. He was executed, there you go. So maybe we were like, wow, right? I mean, you know, Adrian the serial killer, wow, I'm glad he's gone. We even rejoice in his death. Okay? Yeah, this is the reaction. We read it on the news and we go, how horrific. So our heart is pretty, and then we hear the life story of Adrian the serial killer. How he was, and I'm sure that every perpetrator is a victim in a certain way. So he was probably abused. Maybe he was tortured by his father or his mother. I mean, in some cases there may be a serial killer born in an ordinary family and they just have this psychopathic kind of tendency. So maybe in a previous life they basically habituated their mind. But let's say Adrian, I don't know anything about Adrian, but let's assume he was terribly mistreated. So understanding the causes and conditions, does it soften your heart? There you go. It softens your heart. Thinking, if I were in this situation, like Adrian, if I had been brought up with the same kind of parents, the same kind of environment, do I know for certain I would not become a serial killer? I can't say, right? I cannot tell. I remember my stepmother's mother, she lived until the age of 100. She passed away in 2022, so not long ago. And I used to go and visit her. And she was an anti-Semite, a person who hated Jews. Wow, I didn't know that. She was born at a time in Germany when she was old enough to have anti-Semitic ideas. And I go to Israel oftentimes once a year. I have some friends over there. I teach the Dharma there. There's a nice group of people interested in Buddhism. So I have this connection with Israel, the Holy Land. It really feels a very special place, despite the conflict. And to hate Jews is so alien to me that when I came the first time, when she told me the first time, it was a few years ago, I would go to visit her every year. She was my step-grandmother, but still I felt like, oh, she's my grandmother, because we're quite close, the whole family. So I went to see her, and suddenly she was like, oh, these Jews who went to Israel. I mean, she's very sweet to me, but like, oh, these Jews. I was like shocked, Germans don't talk like that nowadays, right? Even if they feel that way, it's illegal to even say that, actually. There are a lot of things you're not allowed to criticize openly and stuff. So I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, my granny, she's an anti-Semite, she's a Nazi. I mean, she's a Nazi. She was like in her early 20s, so she wasn't, I was shocked. My brothers and sisters used to say, watch out, she's a Nazi, but I never believed it. They didn't use these words, but they were like, watch out, she's anti-Semitic. And I was like, nah, I don't think she's so sweet. Anyway, so she said this, and I went home. I kept it a secret. I didn't want that they even stronger. Oh my gosh, I was so disturbed. And then I started thinking, wow, the way she was brought up in the environment at that time, you know, I mean, she was only in her early 20s. She was not one of the Nazis. She was not close to Hitler or anything. She just was brainwashed in that way. So how dare I feel so superior? Like, you know, like it helped me to think, do I know for certain I would have not had the same views if I had been born in that environment? And then I could let it go. It was not like, I mean, it was still wrong. I still felt it was wrong. Her view was wrong, but I wasn't going to change her. She was in her 90s at the time. And then soon afterwards, she started showing early signs of dementia. Anyway, then she forgot everything about that. Anyway, she never talked bad about Jews. So the thing is, and she had a very mild version, so it was fine. She was still fully functioning. But the point is that it's so helpful to think of causes and conditions, even without emptiness, even without that, to just think the people around us, like the people we hate, we don't like, how much do we know about them? What gave rise to them? If at some point they come into the office and they say something really cruel, maybe something horrible just happened to them and they just can't control it. Maybe they're so deeply sad that this is an outlet for them. Because happy people are usually not abusive. Happy, satisfied, peaceful people no need to be rude and tough. And those who are tough with others are usually much tougher towards themselves. They have their moments of arrogance, but I'm pretty sure they have their moments of beating themselves up. Right? Often they're very cruel with themselves as well. They have self-hatred. They have no self-confidence. They think they're worse than others. And so by putting others down, it makes them feel better. It's so sad. Do you want to be like that? I don't want to change. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be an abusive person. So this is not meant to be patronizing, like pitiful. No. But really deep compassion to understand that is so sad that they are like that, and these causes and conditions that give rise to them. So of course we should not become suckers. What's the word in Hebrew? The Israelis have a problem with being a sucker. What's the word? Forget now. I always use it. You don't become anyway, I'll look it up. Never mind, you don't need to know. But the point is, so like, you don't want to become a sucker. You don't want people to walk all over. You don't do that person a favor. You still need to be strong and assertive. They're harming themselves and others. It's important to stop them, but without the hatred in your heart. Without the hatred in your heart. Instead, we can be compassionate and still be, tough. I mean, tough in a fair sense. That is directed by care and not by hatred. Friar, that's the Israeli word. It means sucker. No Israeli wants to be a friar. Friar, it's a really bad word, friar. It's like a sucker, becoming a sucker. So we don't want to become that. So there's a fine line between becoming like everyone walks over us versus hating that person and just retaliating. There's a middle way. By being stern, by being assertive when we need to be, but free from that hatred and anger. Based on the understanding of causes and conditions. So you see how beneficial that is. Right? Okay, I'm tempted to make this your homework, but you've got big homework. No, that's out. No. Please do your homework the way I explained it. Please do. Please make the time. Because we have only limited time. I am deeply impressed by how quickly I can go through it. I don't see confusion really on your faces. Every now and then that's like, but I love it that you're so expressive, so I can really tell. But still, you get even more out of it if you take it to a different level. Yes. So now we have 5 minutes, for questions. We'll have more time anyway, but for today, I've talked for a long time. So if you have any questions, 5 minutes. And I may go a little bit over time, which, if you don't mind, of course you can stay behind. If you need to go, you can just get up. It's up to you. I wouldn't consider it as rude or anything, but I may go a little bit over time depending on how many questions you have. Yeah. Okay, good. Please do.
Could you please explain why, if a self exists inherently, it has to be totally independent of the past? This is because the lower schools, such as the Sotatika, they do assert inherent existence, yet they also assert that the whole depends on the past. So why is the Prasangika assert that if it's inherent existence, it has to be totally unrelated to the past?
Okay, so he's making a very good point. He's comparing 2 philosophical schools. Now, this may be a little bit difficult for those of you who don't have the background in these philosophical schools, but don't be intimidated because it's not that difficult, actually. Now, the lower schools, other than the Prasangika schools, have a lot of contradictory views. Contradictory views, like we do. We're very good at holding in contradictory views, right? We're very good at believing, dependent arising, but still inherent existence. They do the same. Because the thing is, like, if you start to meditate, and you meditate, I'm not even talking about really highly advanced meditation, just, the usual meditations. In the very beginning, there is an unsettling experience when you think you can't find the I, and then the parts of which the I is made, again, you can't find them, and you take it apart further, and you can never find anything essential, and you come to the conclusion, how can everything come into existence if there's nothing? How can something come from nothing? It comes to that point, doesn't it? So it's very unsettling, like, whoa, Prasangika school is a little weird here. Why? Because we've always believed there must be something stable, some stable building blocks. Oh, there are these atoms. The atoms, they save us, right? A sense that there's something solid. Because we have, it's part of our psychological makeup. Some of the non-Buddhist schools, they have a whole philosophy on this permanent building blocks, this permanent underlying principle or whatever, which very much is in tune with our psychological way of looking at the world. And the Prasangika school, it's like they pull the rug underneath our feet. Okay, so these schools, these lower schools, they're a little bit like crutches. They give us crutches. They give us, like when you don't know how to swim, so you put on these little wings, or you have training wheels, like riding a bicycle. So it's like they say, okay, everything is dependent arising, but don't worry, there's something you'll find, right? It's a bit like a training wheel. You can get used to dependent arising without feeling like, oh no, that can't be right. So you still have a sense of inherent existence. So the Buddha gave us a training wheel, gave us a crutch, until we learn to walk without the crutch, until we learn to swim without the little wings. What are they called? Wings, right? Forget it. Training wheels. You ride a bicycle without falling off this side or that side. It's a bit like riding a bicycle. So the lower schools are like training wheels, little crutches. So, okay, they take you further enough. You know what they do is they make the mind, the philosophical schools, if you go from the bottom all the way up, they make your mind more flexible. They train your mind. It's like your brain, you make new connections. If you talk about it from a neuroscientific point of view or from a Buddhist point of view, your mind becomes more flexible. First, you're just introduced to a self that doesn't exist the way it appears, like on a coarser level. And in the lower schools, you're told, yeah, but everything out there exists objectively. Okay, so my ordinary perception of things out there is not taken away, but at least the self on a coarser level is explained to not exist in a certain way. So that's one extreme, that externally there's all these objective reality. And then there's the Chittamatra school, which is another extreme. There's only mind. So when you're on a balance beam, you go from here to here, right? There's no objective reality, there's only the mind. But it makes your mind more flexible to move away from that external and focus more on the mind. In that extreme way, but still it's helpful psychologically. Then you're introduced to the Svatantrika school. First they say, okay, there's only the mind, but nothing exists truly. So that would be Yogacara Svatantrika school. But then you move to the Yogacara, the Svatantrika school that says phenomena exist externally, yes, but it's totally dependent on the mind. But don't worry, you still find something. There's still something essential can be found. So until when you get to this point, your mind has become quite flexible, able to no longer believe that things exist independent of mind, that you need a mind. Understanding the importance of mind. At the same time, the rug is not pulled underneath your feet. So you've got a little bit hope, there's a little bit inheritance, right? Yeah, there's something that can be found. So your mind has become really flexible now, able to cope with a lot. And then the Buddha teaches, sorry, training wheels off, crutch is gone, now you walk, you make it work. There is, mind is very important, the external world still exists, but conventionally and inherently nothing can be found. And everything is possible because it lacks inherent existence. So you move away from the autonomy school, everything is possible because you can find something. That's how it feels. That last crutch is gone, and now we've got it. So it's a slow preparation. It's a very skillful preparation. It's a little bit like going to school. I remember when I was going to school, in elementary school, we were shown how to brush our teeth, how we should take care of our dental hygiene. So instead of showing us how bacteria and, they look like, they were like little people with, what do you call these hammers? These hammers that make holes in the street. Jackhammers. They were little people with jackhammers. This is how I learned how to take care of my teeth. So this was like a training wheel. I couldn't think of bacteria and stuff. I wouldn't have understood them. But these scary guys with their jackhammers, they really got me to brush my teeth. So that's what, like the lower schools, right? The idea of my teeth getting, being rotten, rotting when I eat certain sweets. So these were like training wheels. That was not reality. But it helped me to get a better understanding how I need to take care of myself. And then in 3rd, 4th grade, it was explained to us in the proper way. So likewise with mathematics, you're kind of gently led in those directions. Like the deepest levels, you're not introduced, you're probably going to run off if you're introduced to this deepest level. It's all an introduction. And it makes your mind more flexible. And some of what you're taught may not be in accordance with reality, such as the little man with their jackhammers. But it helped me to get a better understanding that there are forces that are harmful in the form of bacteria. There are bacteria, aren't they? Well, whatever. So the point is, therefore, in Buddhism, you have the same pedagogical method. It's just pedagogical method. So therefore, the Svatantrika school, the followers of the Svatantrika school may, of course, believe in that, but the Buddha doesn't. From the point of view of the Buddha, that's a crutch. That's a training wheel. Does that explain that? Good. Okay, lovely. More questions?
So traditionally, we are being introduced to 3 levels of dependent origination,
Yes.
which you have just shared.
Yeah.
Some teachers, I think, including Rinpoche, he actually introduced the concept of relativity as part of dependent origination. Can I elaborate that more, and why is it they actually added something that was not traditional in a way?
We'll come to that. Actually, yes, you're right. The relativity is usually part of the second type. That is usually included in the second type on parts. But it's not really literally a part. So they kind of say it's implied. It's implied in that. But we'll come to it. Like, for instance, you are a father in relation to your children. But your children are not a part of you. It may feel that way, but literally it's actually they're not a part of you. So that is a type of long is dependent on short, short independent on long. It's not literally expressed when you talk about parts, but it's usually said to be implied. It's part of the second type. They usually include it in the second type. Yes. Yeah, it is important. I mean, Nagarjuna mentioned it in the Precious Garland. He said very clearly, long is dependent on short, short is. So it's definitely been taught by Nagarjuna and even more so by the Buddha. But in this maybe you could do a fourth category. You could actually mention a fourth category. There's also a tradition where you only have two types of dependent origination. Dependence on labeling. And then you have the two that I hear separately explained as parts and dependence on. So dependence on parts is dependence on the basis of imputation, and then dependence on the actual labeling. So they're separately explained. I'm more comfortable with the explanation dividing them into three. Geshe Kelsang, for instance, divides them into two. But that's just a different way of dividing it. And again, this relativity is implied, is included in the second type. I've heard this from many of my teachers. Yeah. But we'll come to this. So for those who aren't familiar with that, I'll mention it again tomorrow. Yes. Other questions? Yes? Can you? Yeah.
I'm not sure if I could say it coherently. It's related to the homework about finding the I. So previously I've tried to imagine in my mind all my body parts, and then I just take out one by one. I did this using my mind. And logically I understood that I'm not the body parts, I'm not my head, I'm not my whatever. But then if I open my eyes and I look at myself, and let's say I hurt my toe, so the toe is so-called not in the picture, but I still feel the I. So the question is, this homework about looking for the I, it's a mental activity, right?
Yes.
And not a feeling thing.
You can stub your toe and feel just generate that sense of I'm not saying walk around and stub your toe, but literally you can take that experience of the physical pain where you had a strong sense, I'm hurting. Take that I, right? But this is not the physical toe or anything. It's just how it felt in that moment. That's the mental experience. So it may have been triggered by something physical, but that was just the trigger. So just how does the I feel? If someone were to ask you, does your I exist? You would say yes, right? Don't think like a Buddhist, because don't answer like a Buddhist. Just answer truthfully. I don't answer like a Buddhist. I don't even answer like a Svatantrika. Sometimes I'm thinking I'm not even like a Vaibhashika person. Right? Not at all. I feel like I read non-Buddhist texts and I go, that feels right. Right? So how does it feel? How does it ordinarily feel in your everyday dealing with people? How does the I feel? Just remember, how does it feel when I'm together with this stupid colleague, or whatever, right? With this annoying guy that always hangs out near the coffee machine. Right? So think, how does it feel? How do I feel in relation to them when they talk to me, when they're rude, when they're patronizing, or whatever it is that annoys me about them? How do I feel? Get in touch with that self. right? And it's difficult first. It's very difficult. It eludes us. Because it's not there, so that's why it eludes us. But no, the point is, it's like, but it does appear sometimes strongly. It does appear sometimes strongly. And then, once you identify that, where is it? Where is it in my body? Right? If I were to look, if it's positioned here, does it feel like everything that in my head is above or not? Is it in my head somewhere, behind my eyes, between my ears? So is it like, what is the connection between this and my toe that I just stuck, right? So I just really analyze, check, try to see. When you're distracted, just say, okay, distraction, go away. Let me just do my thing. Go back. Gently take your mind. You'll be distracted. It's normal. Don't expect you can do this for hours on end. Even 10 minutes is going to be a challenge for all of us. So just gently take the mind back whenever you're distracted. So again, what is that connection between what makes it my toe? What makes it my reputation? And where is that I in relation to mind and body? Is it the same as my mind and body? Or is it something separate? Is it something separate from mind and body? Do you see what I'm saying? If it's separate, can it exist without my mind and body? Because the way it appears to me, it's like it could exist in and of itself. It doesn't feel like it's just labeled. And if it's not just labeled, well, it's separate from my mind and body. It could exist without them. So look for it and keep looking for it. Just keep, like you're a scientist, investigating this. Does that make sense? The way I just did it? Try as much as you can, but understand what is the goal. The goal is to come to the conclusion it's not there. It cannot be found. The thing that is most important in our lives, let's be honest, when you lose the object of negation, think, what is that I that we constantly protect? What is the I that we do everything for? Get back to that. If that cannot be found, what does that mean? Does that make sense? So again and again, when you lose the object of negation, go and find it again and go back to the analysis. You lose it again, go back to the analysis, right? Time and again, very gently. Gentle is important. You have to be gentle with yourself. Don't be impatient with your absence of a meditative mind. I mean, you end up being angry with yourself. No. We're not that used to it, to doing this, and we will distract it. But just gently bring the mind back and check again. Where's that I? Don't do more than half an hour. Or maybe break it up in like 10 minutes, take a break, a cup of tea, be happy, enjoy, and go back. Be very relaxed. Very important. And so try it again. And then I ask you, what kind of emotion should you have? Making it even harder. Sorry, I took it from there. Did I answer your question? So, but now I want you to have an emotional response. What could logically be that emotion? What could that be emotion? And I'm not saying it has to be an emotion like joy or sadness or fear. It doesn't have to be any of them. What kind of emotional response could it be? And joy is not a bad thing. That would be great. Yes, it's not there. Freedom. But I don't expect you to have that necessarily. It's difficult. What could it be? What could be an emotional response that would logically make sense in such a way that it could affect your actions? Because only an emotional response can really affect our actions. What would that be? How would you put it into words? It's not findable, but how can you put that into an emotion? I mean, it's like, not findable, what's next? Right? There's that. And then there is a more emotional, like package it in an emotional way. What could that be? Pardon? Yeah, but what is the emotion that I'm looking for? Pardon? Huh?
Surprise.
Surprise. Good one. Like, yeah, that's a good one. Surprise. Or like, wow, awesome, as Americans would say. You know, like awesome, like this, whoa, like surprise. That's really, it's like, yeah, we should be surprised. Right now, it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, but who knows? We're kind of in between. But like, wow, like this wow. I mean, I look at this like the wow effect. Like Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, whoa, 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 wow. Yeah, that expresses that, like, wow, amazing. That surprise, that pleasant surprise. No one can take that away. When you really reach that, when it's sincere, right now it may be faked, of course, but our mind is such that when we fake it, we can make it. So be careful with the faking. If you're faking too much and you're like, oh, I'm just faking it anyway, you've got another mind telling you you're faking it anyway, then that's a problem, right? The other mind is going to be, no, we have to be like, understanding what's the whole purpose of this. What's the purpose of it? To be moved in such a way that next time someone insults us, I'm like, nothing really happened, right? So we have a different response. And it may be years from now on, but that's the goal. That there's no sense of an inherent I that can fail, that can be insulted, that can be... So we float above many of these situations that would usually take us into Great Depression. That's the goal, as a beginner. So if we understand that, we can then find a way to get to that result. As I said, your meditations need to be adjusted to your needs, and only you can adjust them. Only you can do that. So I'm just giving you a course guideline. But when you understand what I want you to do, what should be the end result, then you'll find a clever way. And that's so beautiful. When I give these instructions later on, people come to me and say, look, you said such and such, but that didn't work for me. I did such and such, and that was the result. And I go, that's exactly what I want you to do. Exactly. Because you know yourself better. Just knowing what I want you to do, and you found a way, you found a method to get there. Because these are all methods to get to a certain result. So let's work with it. Let's try it. And then you can, of course, always ask. Yeah? Great. Wonderful. This is great. It's not easy. Sorry. It's like going to a gym is not easy. It's hard. But it's making the effort in itself is already a great benefit. I mean, it's just having done it is beneficial without any expectations. Yes.
I have a similar question about the homework.
Please go ahead. Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy you're actually asking about the homework. That means you're going to do the homework. Nice.
So, if I stub my toe and I think I feel pain, and you're saying negate the inherent existence of I search for it, and I...
In between, I would say make sure the sense of I appears stronger to your mind, to have a really strong sense of what you're analyzing now. And I'm not saying negate it. I'm saying analyze it. Look for it.
Okay.
I'm not saying, okay, there's something there, it's not there. Okay, let's go home. No. That would unfortunately be, that would not be enough. You need to really, okay, it's there. My experience is it's there. How does it feel? In this situation, when I stub my toe, when I'm being insulted, when I'm sick, when I'm being praised, when I'm being... Try to think of different situations to get a clearer sense of that I. And then say, okay, it feels like it's there. Feels very strongly. That's my experience. Now let's look for it. So without kind of going, it's not there. No. It's there. And I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it. First, it's like you can find it. Buddha is wrong. Sorry, Buddha was wrong. Or it was an interpretative teaching. You can even go to that extent. Right? Believe in it first. Look for it.
Search for the inherentness of the existence of the I.
That inherent I, the way it appears to us, this inherently existent I, exactly.
What about the phenomenon of the experience of pain? Is that separate?
The phenomenon of the experience. All right, you're taking it already to the next level. That is maybe too much to include that in the homework as well. The pain, yes, there's an experience of pain. Okay, that's fine. We can analyze that at a different time, but for now, I want you to only focus on the I that is experiencing the pain without analyzing the pain, because that's a whole different other kind of topic we'll go into. So if for some reason I forget, I want to address it, but I may forget, so please remind me unless it gets answered in a different context. But for now, that's not your homework. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Can we pass on the mic? Yeah.
Sorry.
Just push up.
Oh,
Push up.
there's nothing. Can you hear me anyway?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
I'll repeat the question afterwards just for the recording.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going back to the basics again because yesterday you spoke a lot about this center of the universe syndrome, which I have perfected.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you. And when you come to Buddhism, you hear all these terms like inherently existent I, right? So my basic question is this: what is the difference between the inherently existent I and the ego?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question, especially since in modern psychology, for instance, I think it was Freud who talked about the ego and the superego. It's like two. It's got two. So I don't really know what, I only heard the terminology, I don't know what Freud meant. It just depends how you use the word ego. I guess it depends on that. Some people may say the ego is the inherently existent self, while others may say it's the self-centeredness that is the ego, right? Because when we say this person has a huge ego, well, something that doesn't exist can't be huge. So if it were the inherently existent self, it's neither huge nor small or whatever, it doesn't exist. It doesn't have any characteristics. It's just projected or it's just imagined by the mind. Versus the self-centeredness that exists. Its object, which is an inherent I, doesn't exist, but a mind can be a wrong mind that perceives something that doesn't exist, and that mind can be very strong. So I think I would say that in general, the way we use it, the ego refers to the self-centered mind. That's the self, yeah. It's not the inherent I, the non-existent I, but rather it's the mind, the self-centered mind that is attached to this imagined non-existent I. So that's self-centeredness. Self-centeredness is a mind that is attached to this non-existent I, and that which is the happiness of that non-existent I, and considers that to be more important, and is attached to it in the sense that everything we do is influenced by that I. Anything to benefit this I and benefit the happiness of this I. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just to build on that question
Please.
of ego, would it be an inflated, exaggerated mind?
Yeah.
With superiority in mind?
Yeah, that is very important. I mentioned it briefly before, that not only our root ignorance is an exaggerated mind, it adds more to what's actually there. Right? We've seen already it adds inherent existence. It exaggerates in the sense it adds to the actual existence of things, perceiving a conventional I to exist independently or inherently. So it exaggerates, right? Does that make sense that we exaggerate? I don't know whether we use that term in that way, but actually it does exaggerate. Now, one thing I think is very important to understand, we make it sound very simple, but there's much more to it. I actually did a drawing for a class I'm teaching in Dharamsala, where, I can't show it to you, it's too small. But the point is, like, if you have a person, myself for instance, so what do I perceive when it comes to the root misperception? It's not just I perceive myself to exist inherently, I also perceive you guys as inherently different. You are inherently other. I'm inherently I. This is not just conventionally my body, it is inherently my body. My suffering is inherently bad. My happiness is inherently important. So it's not just that I exaggerate the way in which I perceive of the I itself, but also everything in relation to that I is inherently important, inherently my I, inherently my body, inherently my mind. So there are all these exaggerated thoughts when it comes to me in relation to everyone else. You are inherently distant. You are over there. Not only are you conventionally not me, but you're inherently, you're truly, totally different, unrelated to me. So based on all that, I therefore develop the sense I'm important and my happiness is important. This is extreme, more important than yours. This is not self-centeredness yet. It's not attachment yet. First, I exaggerate the importance of I and my happiness based on all these wrong views when it comes to inherent existence. Inherent I, inherent mind, inherent body, inherent happiness, inherent suffering, all that leads to this exaggerated view, I'm more important, my happiness is more important. And that is called the inappropriate attitude. And then, a moment later, there's attachment to I and my happiness. And that is an extreme mind, because now it perceives I and my happiness as more important, and it's attached. So it's two in one. It's not just this exaggerated mind, but it's also an emotional response to that, which is attachment, not being able to let go. Grasping, holding on to I and my happiness, and that grasping influences all my actions now. All done for I and my happiness. I and my happiness. So in other words, therefore, in answer to your question, this very complicated roundabout, from a wrong view with regard to inherent existence, I went to an exaggeration of the importance of I and mine, to attachment. And that is self-centeredness. It is an extreme mind, and that exaggerates the importance of I and mine, but also holds on to them. You have those two. So it's an extreme mind, is a wrong mind. And this happens then, once that has been established, that kind of self-centeredness, now if someone harms me, okay, someone insults me, after I've exaggerated the importance of I and my happiness, now my response is the insult is seen as, in an exaggerated way, as negative. That's the first step, the inappropriate or exaggerating attitude, which a moment later gives rise to anger or aversion. And this anger and this aversion, not only do they also have this extreme sense of the negativity, exaggerating the negativity, in this case of the insult, but there's also this emotional response, like I want to be away from them, I want to harm this person, and that's called anger. And every afflictive emotion or any mental affliction, klesha, is always an extreme mind that doesn't perceive things as they are. It always has an exaggerated component. Okay? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Important question. I mean, all your questions are important, honestly. They are. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Can I ask it sounds like a redundant question. Maybe related to the pain or now I'm feeling very cold actually.
You're feeling cold?
Yeah, because of that.
Yeah.
So if the I
Uh-huh.
doesn't exist, yeah, cannot find it, cannot find itself.
Yeah.
So if I ask the other way around.
Okay, we cannot find the I. All right, go ahead.
So who is feeling this cold, or what is feeling this cold?
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, that was your question. All right, might as well go.
Who is feeling the pain, or
right.
What is feeling the pain?
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. Okay, you're right. I think it is the time. It's the time to now talk about it since you're cold. Yeah, in that moment it feels much more real, right? Okay. So we say, I feel cold. But we've heard that the I is merely labeled. Now, if the I is merely labeled, on what parts could the I be labeled in that moment? Is it labeled on the mind? Is it labeled on the body? Or on something else in that moment? What do you think could be the basis of labeling in that moment? It's not your nose. It's not your nose, really, right? Is it? Or maybe if you're cold in your nose, okay. But there's certain parts in your body that don't feel cold. Would you agree? Oh, you're totally cold. Okay. All right. Okay. So once you're cold, you're cold. All right. So, what experiences the cold? When you say here experience, is that a mind or a body? Experiencing. What does the experiencing? The body experiences? Yeah, we talk like that actually. But the body really, what does it do? What happens on a physiological basis? Nerves, they react. There's information sent to the brain. Pardon? It transmits. Oh, that's the proper word. Yeah, it transmits certain information, electronic something, right? So this is all. None of this is cold, right? But then our mind, our mental, our body consciousness, cold is experienced by the body consciousness. It experiences it as cold. Because if you were Indian, if you were, what do you call it, people from the very cold areas, like if you came from Siberia, you may be sweating away right now. Okay, so your body, it's very much your bodily reaction, but whether it's hot or cold, that is basically an experience, because strictly speaking, from a Buddhist point of view, experience is happening on a sense consciousness level in this case. So oftentimes we don't distinguish between the sense consciousness and the body because they're so closely linked. But strictly speaking, there's a physical response, of course, we can explain with modern science, but that's not the experience. The experience is with your body consciousness. Your body consciousness experiences cold, an unpleasant feeling. So it's a feeling, it's a mental factor of feeling, which is unpleasant. It's your body consciousness, based on what your brain, etc. has done. So your body consciousness experiences cold. Your mental consciousness then goes, oh, bloody hell, it's so cold, right? I mean, it labels then, oh, it's so cold and uncomfortable. If, for instance, you were told freezing is a really good thing, it helps your brain, you may actually go, oh, great, my brain is like, I'm just making this up as I go along. But if someone really would, like scientists have just found, if you freeze every day for 15 minutes, you won't get Alzheimer. You may actually sit there, oh, I'm so cold, oh, good, I'm actually doing something, right? So mentally, there's no negative reaction yet. Physically, there is. So now you label, I am cold. Based on what? Your body consciousness. So you label I on the body consciousness. It's just labeled on the body consciousness. If I poke you with a needle, you experience that. So you feel cold. It's based on the body consciousness. But then if you mentally start thinking, oh, I'm so cold, or this needle is really disturbing, you label it on both, on the body consciousness and the mental consciousness that is now also responding. And I mean, actually, once the body consciousness, I should put it this way, so once the body consciousness experiences cold, there's very soon afterwards a mental consciousness also thinking, I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm cold. But whether it's pleasant or not depends on if in that moment you feel like, oh, but that's actually a good thing. You may enjoy it for a moment. But the point is that it's your mind. It's your mind that experiences the cold. Based on the body reacting in a particular way. So you could say both mind and body feel cold if you want to go as far, because without the body having that experience, the body consciousness couldn't have its particular experience. So you could say, yeah, so it's mind and body both. But is there a separate I? That's the question now. So the body is cold, obviously, the temperature's gone down, whatever happens in the brain happens. There's the experience with the body consciousness and also the mental consciousness going, oh, I'm really cold. So that's all. Is there a separate I that's kind of shivering away, standing next to mind and body and going, oh, bloody hell, when this is... No, it feels that way. But it's merely labeled on the basis of the chemical or physiological reaction in the body and the mental experience. It's labeled on that. Are you satisfied with that answer? It's a little complicated. Look for that I that is shivering away next to mind and body. It feels that way. Well, that's a good time to look for that freezing I. So go home, crank up the air conditioner, sit next to it. And
so in summary, am I right to say that what you're saying is it's just a physiological...
There's a physiological reaction, there's a mental reaction.
Mental and physical reaction.
Yep. And then based on that, we label I, and now believe, oh, the I is not merely labeled, it's truly there. Right? We label automatically. In fact, labeling happens all the time. So because once we label right away, there's a sense there's really something there, we reinvent. We reinforce our sense of an inherent I. We constantly reinforce it. We constantly reinforce it. It's very interesting. We'll go more into this as we go along. It also gives us a sense of permanence of the I. A sense of permanence. Let me ask you one thing. Is there a sense that the I that walked into this hall, into this room, whenever you walked in, and the I that sits there is the same I? Honestly? I'm not saying intellectually what you heard about Buddhism. How does it feel? Does it feel it's the same I? Your mind may have changed, your body may have changed. There's a sense, yeah, they could have changed, but the I is a constant. Well, welcome to your sense of a permanent I based on your sense of an inherent I. Say hello to that second wrong consciousness, right? The sense of a permanent I. That I that came into the room and the I that's now there, that's been sitting here for a while, that's been pretty cold for a while, that I is the same. So it's this constant because there's always the sense of I, and because it appears similar to the mind, to us, there's a permanent I. We go from not just an inherent I, but a permanent I. Mind and body have changed, I is the same. That's why we hold a grudge. Because that's the guy who abused me. That's the same guy. It was last week, but that's the same guy, right? Holding a grudge, we hold a grudge because we hold on to permanence. We perceive them to exist inherently, and we hold on to permanence. I'm taking it a little bit further from what you asked. But it's fascinating how from one underlying root cause, we go to other wrong views. So one underlying wrong view gives rise to other wrong views when it comes to permanence. Holding a grudge is such a fascinating phenomenon. We perceive the person who has harmed us to be the same. So they harmed us last week, and now I meet the same person on the street, and I have a sense they're the same. Last week's person and that person now are one. And I'm still hurting. I'm the one who was hurt last week, and I'm the one that's still hurting now. I'm one. So I've just made myself permanent, and the other person is one. In my mind, they became permanent. So a lot of our emotional responses come from these wrong views. Holding a grudge, a resentment. I couldn't have resentment, I couldn't hold a grudge if I understood that I'm impermanent, the person is impermanent, because none of us exists inherently. And the I was just labeled. In the case of him being cold, there is no I that existed. You just labeled I on the basis of the mind that feels uncomfortable, based on your sensations in the body. And that these sensations are not really experienced by the body. If you were not a masochist, what does it mean? Like a person who likes to experience pain. Masochist is called masochist. So for one person's pain is another person's pleasure. Eating chili is another example. Eating chili, right? The experience is probably the same. I mean, it's not like my mom has a different experience of eating chili, or I have a different experience, but I love that hot in my mouth and that whatever it is, that tingling. But someone else may hate it. So I don't think that the physical response is different, but the mental response, as versus positive or negative, is different. So in answer to your question once again, there's a certain physical response, but I don't think there's any kind of positive or negative yet. It's the mental that turns it into some negative, like I'm too cold. Okay, that was a long-winded answer. But it was a good question. It was not redundant, by the way. Okay. All right. So it is a little late. Okay, so please do your homework. And at the very end, let's use the power of our mind. Whatever positive potential, whatever positive energy we've accumulated here together, to think that may not get lost or be wasted by ripening into a meaningless experience, but may it ripen in the form of our own ability to follow the path, to do all the meditations in order to eventually realize the true truth, eliminate what's in the way to enlightenment, and therefore attain the enlightened state of a Buddha for the benefit, most importantly, of all sentient beings. And may, of course, in the meantime, our lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, our great spiritual masters, continue to be among us to guide us through their examples and through their words. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayer. Chanchu Sencho Rinpoche, Maki Pana Kikuchi, Kiva Nyamba Vipaya, Oni Kondu Kiva Sho. Hanji Dawe Kowe Shinkansu, Pendan Dewa Mandu Jumene, Chere Zibon Tenzin Yasuri, Shabe Site Pandu Denkyushi.